very good evening to all of you. Thank you all for logging in on time today. It's my pleasure in welcoming you all for the third session of the series on how to be investment ready, presented by TiE Chennai and Kiritsu Forum. The second session last week was on various stages of funding and investors' expectation for each stage of funding. Today, the third session is going to be on fundraising part 1. So with this, let me introduce the speaker for the series How to be Investment Ready, Mr. Subramaniam Iyer. Mr. Subra is a forensic accountant, independent director, angel investor, strategy consultant focusing on business models, and an expert witness with over 30 years of work experience in Asia, Australia, and transaction experience in Asia, Europe, and the US. He's the co-president of Kiritsu Forum Singapore and Chennai. Kiritsu Forum is the largest angel network in the world with 53 chapters and 3,000 accredited investors in the entrepreneur space. Over the last decade, Mr. Subra has played a missionary role in guiding and assisting CEOs of small companies in South India and Southeast Asia through critical growth stages. In India and more broadly Asia, through his other ventures, Subra worked on understanding and addressing the severe shortage of resources in the small business sector, from financial capital to experience capital, relationship capital, and infrastructure. He was a partner with the PricewaterhouseCoopers, Singapore. In over 21 years with PwC, he has been an auditor and a tax due diligence, and in the 21 years with PwC, he led over 100 engagements of various sizes, including many that were cross-border for US and European multinational corporations and equity firms. He qualified with his bachelor's in accountancy from the National University of Singapore and thereafter with the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Australia. He also completed the General Management program at Harvard Business School in the fall of 2007 and is an alumnus of the school. So on behalf of TiE Chennai and the participants here, I welcome you, sir, and invite you to take over today's session.
Okay, thanks, Saurabh. Good evening, everyone. You know, we will get into the session. Today's session is going to be a little heavier than the one we had last week because it is discussing an important point about business models. Kapil, if you move to the next slide. Yeah, so I do see names that, you know, I can't remember from the earlier sessions. I'm sure some of y'all attended the earlier sessions. Yep, there are some of y'all whose names have flowed through from the earlier sessions, but some of y'all have not. But so let me give the context of how this series is running. You know, we touched on, are you know, startup ready right at the outset. We talked about the stages of funding and investor expectations. And because it was a little light on content, we had a lot of conversations about it, mostly from my experience. Today's session on business models, a business plan, I mean, you might wonder what has it got to do with fundraising? But it has got everything to do with fundraising because, you know, when you're looking to raise money, the questions are, right, you know, is your business model defensible? Will it work? You know, will it make enough money? You know, is it a repeatable proposition? All those questions come in, right? So before I talk about the actual fundraising, which is next week's session on how to plan and execute a fundraise, you know, it is very important that we talk about business models first. And as you heard Saurabh talk about my CV, I actually started my first workshop with TiE on business models over 10 years ago, right? So this is one of my, you know, favorite pet topics, if you like. It's something I've talked about for 10 years. And of course, over 10 years, it has evolved based on, you know, my experiences with a lot of startups through TiE as well as through Kiritsu Forum. You know, if you stay on for the series, you know, we will talk a little bit more of how you actually go about the fundraising next week. and then getting ready for due diligence, and we'll finally touch on valuations and transaction documents and some of the key terms of it. Next slide, Kapil. Okay. So today we are going to talk about the value proposition canvas as well as the business model canvas. Saurav, did you all manage to send out the canvases to the participants earlier today?
Yes, sir. We did.
Okay. Right. The reason I wanted those sent out is because it may not be very clear on the slides, right? Because it's been reduced. So if you have those canvases, you can open them up so that you can clearly see them, right? I mean, we are doing a Zoom presentation, so I can't see your faces, and so it's important that you have those canvases so you know what I'm talking about. Now, much about startup success we had already covered in the first session, so I won't talk much about it, and we'll probably jump into the value proposition canvas. So by the end of today, we will link this whole thing into a business model, into a business plan, right? So we will go from business model to business plan. Okay, so next slide. Okay, now a lot about are you startup ready we covered in the first session. And there was one thing I talked about very importantly in the first session is there a fit? So that's where I want to start, which is the next slide. Yeah, okay. Now I will talk about this on one of the companies. I had a fairly substantial investment, and it succeeded on the first two fits, the paper problem fit and the market fit, but it completely failed on business model fit, right? And this was a little bit of a painful write-off for me. And I felt that there are a lot of lessons to be learned from it. So let me explain what the business was. The business was one where we use biologics, and this is, the science is kind of well known. So we use biologics to increase the yield of crops. And we operated, we had a partner who operated in India, but we had borrowed that technology to operate in Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. Now, obviously, even before we picked up the product, it had a solution fit, meaning we could prove in the labs that it actually increased yield. It proved in the lab that you can replicate it, you can package it into a powder form and ship it across the world, right? So on paper there was a solution, right? And clearly there was a problem, and the problem was particularly this was very good with cocoa plants, because cocoa plants suffered from what's called black pod disease, and therefore instead of getting beans, you actually get spores. So there was a real problem, and it was a problem across the world, and certainly it was a problem in both Indonesia and Papua New Guinea, because they were big growers of cocoa, right? The other parts of the world that grows cocoa is West Africa and South America. So these two countries were closer to us. So there was a problem and there was a solution, right? Which really dealt very effectively with black pod, and therefore overall the yield goes up, okay? So we had a solution on paper, and we also had a solution we also had a market fit, because many of the farmers did come and buy it off us, or buy it off our agents in those countries. Now, where it failed was the business model, right? So we were selling it, but we were selling it in such low quantities that we couldn't make a profit out of the whole proposition, right? Hi, Shrikant. Right? So this is the important thing, right? And those of you all who attended my earlier sessions will know that, many investors, particularly Keiretsu, we are prepared to invest as long as you have a product market fit, right? And we give you an early stage funding to let you experiment to figure out whether there's a business model fit. And you should remember that that is a fairly risky proposition, because even though you have a product that is fantastic, farmers actually make more money, but to get repeatable, sustainable orders at a level that you can make a profit becomes a problem, right? And we will think of what could be some of the reasons why, in this particular case, we didn't achieve a business model fit when we get to the business model canvas, right? So this question about fit is extremely important. Okay, next slide, Kapil. Okay, before you form a company and start taking, building a business, right? It is important that you actually test your business model first, right? So there are a few lessons that comes off about startups. And basically the point is no business plan, right? You can have a fantastic plan on paper, but when the first customer tells you, no good, doesn't buy, let alone, you don't achieve your first sale, let alone recurring sale, that's the end of your business plan, right? So you could spend a lot of effort building a business plan, but it's really not worth it, right? And which is why it's the business model stupid, right? You really need to test the business model. And what is the business model, right? So you need to think of alternatives, okay? Do I buy? Do I lease? Do I sell? Do I lease? Do I rent? All of these are business model questions. And we'll talk about some of those alternate propositions when we go through the business model canvas. And remember, when you initially start out, your business model is an idea, right? And it is nothing but a set of hypotheses, right? Which is what? It's a set of assumptions. So until you test those assumptions, you are too early to building the company, right? So the recommended approach, even before you are ready, is actually to test the business model. And this is a very important part of fundraising, because this question will come. Many of us who invest are also ourselves entrepreneurs, right? We know the kind of questions investors ask. So it's important that you get the business model right, and which is why for me, the business model question is an extremely important question, okay? So the next slide, Kapil. Hi, SVK. So where I want to start is the value proposition. And when we talk about value proposition, we talk about two things, right? We talk about the customer segment and the value proposition. Now, what do we mean by customer segment? Okay, you can have a B2C company, in which case your customer segment is any customers, right? But if you're a startup, you probably want to be a little bit more controlled. So you may define your customer segment as geographically, you may define it as nationally, and all that kind of stuff, right? So B2C doesn't mean the world, right? You need to be sensible about defining it, right? Because as a startup, you cannot address everything. You could have a B2B model, which is where most companies come in, because they basically sell to other businesses, right? So in which case, you may be confined to a particular industry. You could be, even if it's either the financial industry, it could be whatever it is, right? So your customer segment may be businesses, right? And again, geography may also be a constraint. And there are a lot of business models today, basically the platform type models, which is a B2B, but the final consumer is a customer, right? So many solutions that reach customers perhaps through mobile operators tend to be a B2B2C kind of proposition. And then in the area of lending, there is a lot of peer-to-peer lending, which is basically customer to customer, right? C2C. What I mean by diversified markets is you could have a combination, right? Instead of just one, you could have you could have a B2C proposition as well as a B2B proposition. Now, investors actually don't look at things like that very favorably, because they feel that that's not focused. even though sometimes it could make sense, right? So that's what I mean by a diversified market. And there is multi-sided market, right? The classic is your newspaper, right? On the one side, you have the subscribers who pay for the newspaper. On the other side, you have the advertisers who pay the newspaper, right? And basically, we used to buy newspapers for really cheap. And nowadays, we get our regional newspapers in Nungambakam or whatever for free because they basically make money out of this, right? And if you think about it, Google is the classic multi-sided market, okay? So that's the customer segment. Okay, so there was a question, could you explain C to C, customer to customer? You guys familiar with peer lending, right? So people come up with these platforms and then they onboard people who are prepared to lend on the one side, which may be institutions, could even be individuals. And on the other side, they arrange to lend that money to all and sundry, right? Could be employees, it could be anybody else, right? So that's what I mean by peer-to-peer. So peer-to-peer lending is really customers on one side and customers on the other side, okay? There was a question about diversified market. Let me come into that when we go to the questions. All diversified means is that you can have a B2C model and a B2B model running at the same time. So it's diversified. Okay, so next slide, I want to get to the value proposition. Now, it's important to understand what's value proposition, right? And this is a really important piece of business models, okay? So value proposition is the benefit that the customer can expect from your products and services. Now, why is that important, right? Only if the solution or your offering provides a benefit that the customer wants, the customer won't pay for it, right? So you really need to get the value proposition right? So let's talk about what are some examples of what is a value proposition, right? So next slide, Kapil. Okay, it's new, right? And the classic is your mobile phone, right? Before we had mobile phones, we had these landlines, which in India was even hard to get, right? But then the mobile phones came, and initially they were huge things. Eventually, Nokia came up with these nice sleek phones. And of course, now the world has changed, right? Nobody talks about Nokia phones anymore. We're talking about Apple, Samsung, and Huawei, and all that kind of thing, right? So when you come up with a new product that never existed, that's a value proposition, right? It is something that provides benefit to the customer, and it's a benefit that the customer had never experienced in the past, right? So coming up with something new, right? Something unique, something novel is a value proposition, right? So when you come up with a company, if you come up with a product or a service that doesn't exist, right? So the newness is your value proposition. Another value proposition is performance, right? As most of you all would know, Google was not the first search engine, right? I think it was Alta Vista or something like that, right? Even I've forgotten, right? Because it's so long ago, right? Why is it that Google survived when no one else did, right? Or people earlier didn't survive? Is because Google performed better than anybody else, right? So performance is often a value proposition, right? And if you, and that's an example of a value proposition. So if you come up with a product or service that is more efficient, right? Maybe you could come up with a solution that makes, fuel injection machines 30 or 40% more efficient. That's performance, right? So if you have solutions that on a technological basis enables the customer, enables a machine or an equipment, whether it's mills, whether it's vehicles, perform much better than what's in the market today, that's an extremely great value proposition. Another value proposition is customization, right? Many customers actually want solutions that specifically fit them, right? Now, we all know SAP or Oracle comes up with all these hardwares that all these MNCs buy. Now, they are generally useless until the whole lot of consultants go in and implement that. And why is that, right? Because these programs are customizable for the specific processes of these companies, right? So customization, therefore, is a value proposition. So you have a product that can be easily customized for different customers in the way that is best suited for them. That's an extremely great value proposition, right? Which is the reason for the success of the SAPs of the world. Now, getting the job done is also a value proposition. And you might wonder, what's the big deal, right? Any product or solution should be able to get the job done. But here we're talking about, for example, a Rolls-Royce engine or a Pratt & Whitney engine, right? Today, even though China talks about coming up, making jet engines, nobody in the world will buy those, right? Because why? They know that a Rolls-Royce engine or a Pratt & Whitney engine or a GE jet engine will get the job done, right? Because getting the job done here is extremely important, right? We can't have planes falling off the sky all the time, right? So in certain segments like that, getting the job done is an extremely important value proposition. Now let's talk about design. This gets a little bit more common. People like to design a house in the way that they want, right? So you get an architect who can design for you in a way that is great, right? So the architect may be very good because he is designing the product with local conditions in mind, maybe weather conditions in mind, maybe whether you're near the sea or not near the sea. So some of these considerations are design considerations, right? And someone who is very good at it, that's a value proposition. Brand is a value proposition. Why do people buy a Rolex and not a Citizen, maybe, right? So brand is a value proposition. Cost and risk reduction is a value proposition, right? So, and cost and risk reduction are slightly different things, okay? So, for example, and by cost reduction, it doesn't mean that your product is necessarily, or your product or service is necessarily cheaper than something else in the market. But your product or service may remove certain functions that the customer does, in which case the customer is able to reduce his cost, right? So you may have a solution, maybe it's a software solution, maybe it's a programming solution, maybe it's a sensor-based solution that reduce the cost of operating things, right? So in which case the customer benefits from a reduced cost. And risk reduction is something we associate a lot with the financial services industry. So as you read from my CV, I'm also a forensic accountant. So some of these advice that we give the exchanges of the world or financial institutions reduces their risk. And risk is a big issue for financial institutions, right? I mean, financial institutions get hauled up today by the regulator for, breach of AML rules, breach of terrorism funding rules. So people pay money to consultants to reduce the risk that such things will happen. And of course, accessibility and convenience are clear value proposition, right? Why do we buy things from the next door Kirana store? Even though, in today's world, we have Big Basket and everybody else, you could order bulk and at a lower cost, but we still sometimes walk next door. Of course, COVID changed a lot of it, but, we do like, to be able to just pop by next door and buy the essential things that we need. And that's really, it's accessible, it's convenient, and that in itself is also a value proposition. Okay. Now let me go to the next slide, a couple. Okay. The slide is clearly very difficult to read, which is why I had asked TiE to send it to you. Right. So if you could launch um, you could launch it on a computer, right? So that you can see the value proposition canvas a lot more clearly, okay? Right? So while I go through this, think of my earlier slide about fit. At the end of the day, at the very basic level, you need to find a fit um, at the value proposition level, and you would need to find a fit at the business model level, right? We're starting with a value proposition, right? So what are we trying to match here? The left square is about your product and your service, right? So at the extreme left, you will describe what your product or service is, okay? Right, so you define what your product or service is, and which is on the left side of the left box. Now, your product or service can create certain gains for a customer. And that's what you describe as gain creators, right? Maybe they reduce time of operations for your customer. It could be things like that. Or it is cheaper for the customer compared to other things. It could also be pain relievers for the customer, meaning that your product or service reduces a real pain, right? So maybe they need to have certain reporting requirements and they're pulling all together manually, right? And you may have a software solution that automates it, right? That's a pain reliever, okay? So you will have to first define what you are. What is the product or service that you're offering? What is the gain that it offers to a customer? And you must have defined your customer segment first. And what is the pain relief that you are providing? Now, before you do this match, you've got to think of who your customer segment is. And the way to think about the customer segment is, what is the job that the customer is performing, right? And we talk about jobs, it's not functional, not just the functional role. Functional role is important. But remember, your customer is a human being, right? So he also has social jobs, right? Whatever he buys, he also needs to look good at a social perspective, right? And maybe he wants to do well, right? And he doesn't want to look like a fool. So there are social and emotional considerations, and that's actually part of the customer's job. And you've got to think about that when you're trying to find a match between your product or service and the customer, right? And what is the customer looking for? They're looking for certain gains. Maybe you can help them do their work faster. You can help them, do it better. You can help them reduce the risk of their work, whatever it is, right? Gains that they are looking for, okay? And they may have certain pains which they want to reduce, right? They want to have not to have large in trays. Maybe the work is more efficient and therefore the in tray is less. And therefore they don't have to work as much overtime perhaps as they do now, right? Now, the value proposition workshops that we run and the business model workshop that we run is a full day workshop. So I'm going to be a little brief, right? So I'm just going to touch on the principles for the purpose of this lecture. Okay, now the next slide. Okay, so I just described the value map, right, which is the square box on the left, and described the customer profile, which was the circle on the right. So the first important question, is there a fit, right? And at this stage, we're still, we haven't even gotten to business model fit here. We're just talking about product market fit, right? You've got products and your customer is the market, right? So by matching your solution, your product or service, what pains it relieve, what gains it create, and if it matches with what the customer is looking for, right? What are the pains he wants solved and what are the gains he's looking for, is truly where you find the fit. Now, no product or service that you're going to innovate on is going to solve every problem. And if you build the golden mousetrap, you will be spending all your life building the mousetrap and you will never sell it, right? So what you're looking for is something business model, okay? Because there's no such thing as finding an 100% match between the value map and the customer profile, okay? And the most important thing about fit, it's the next slide. You have a fit when your customers are excited about your value proposition, okay? And when are they excited? They're excited when it addresses their most important jobs, makes them feel good, maybe socially, makes them, they feel great because they've got a solution that not just help them, but help their department, helps their fellow employees, whatever it is, right? It alleviates their most extreme pains, and it created the essential gains that is looking for. And this is what your customer cares about. And therefore, when you're developing your product or service, it's all about, is that what your customer wants? Because no point building your golden mousetrap that your customer is not prepared to pay for. Because once they've got the mouse, they're going to throw it away, right? So it's important that your product or solution is exactly what your customers care about, or your chosen customer segment actually cares about, right? So the most important point, your customers are judge, jury, and executioner of your value proposition. So if you don't get this product market fit right, this is at a very basic level, right? What is your product, and customer is your market, right? So this is, even before you get to the business model, you really need to get product market fit right. And as I was covering in my earlier sessions, you are ready to knock the door of investors or potential investors when you've got product market fit. Before that, you are actually very early, right? It doesn't mean that there won't be other investors. There could be accelerators who might be interested, but when you're looking for angels or institutions, there is no way you're going to raise money until you have a product market fit, which is really what the value proposition canvas is all about. And a lot of this material is picked up from books, and you would see the references in the canvases that are already sent to you. So you guys can just Google it and find out a lot more. The guys have written a great book. And I think if you go to their website, which is called Strategizer now, you will actually find that they have models that you can use to actually test your product or market vis-a-vis, and some ideas as to how you would get customer feedback so that you can make a reasonable assessment as to whether there is actually a fit between the value map and the customer profile, or which loosely speaking is the product market fit. Okay, so moving on. Okay, right, and therefore with that we move to the business model. So what is a business model? It explains how your business or your organization creates, delivers, and very, very importantly, captures value, right? If you don't do that, it's a bit like my example of a biologics company, right? We can make a few small sales, people come and buy, but we couldn't translate it into big enough sales to actually capture value, right? We created value, we delivered it to some customers, but we didn't do it in a scale sufficiently enough to capture value, right? So you would have heard me talk in my earlier sessions about, people don't really care too much about businesses that they feel cannot scale, right? And you would have heard me say that there is a preference for product companies as opposed to services companies, because scaling services businesses are not all that easy. Not that it's impossible. Some services businesses may be good, but and if you can't scale, you find that you cannot capture value. Okay, so what are the aspects of the business model? The next slide, Kapil. Yep, and again, TiE would have sent you the business model canvas. It's got its 9 boxes. And we talked quite a bit about the 2 most important boxes, which is value proposition and customer segment, right? So this is where you have the product market fit. But a product market fit is not enough, not at all enough for you to actually make recurring sustainable income and to become profitable, okay? You need some of the other things to work, right? The way to think about the business model, the right-hand side of the business model canvas is the customer-facing side of the canvas, right? So today I will mostly talk about that side of the canvas because that's the most important part of your, the most important part of creating, delivering, and capturing value. The left side of the canvas is execution. Again, there are alternatives you can experiment with. That's probably a little easier to think about. So I'll just go very quickly through the slides, but I really want to talk a bit more about the right-hand side of the slides. Okay, Kapil, next. Okay, we've already talked a little bit about customer segments. So the next one. Next slide, Kapil. Yep, I've already talked about value proposition. The next slide. Channel. Okay. Now, if you have your business model canvas out, right? If you're able to launch it and see it while I go through this, right? You need two things to link your value proposition to the customer segment, right? And one of the most important things is the channel, okay? Right? And the easier part is what type of channel? Is it a direct channel, in which case you have your own sales force, you sell it through your web, your own web and things like that, right? And indirect sales channel is you sell through partners, or if you're doing product sales through Amazon or Flipkart or somebody else, right? So you're selling through, the partner medium, right? And wholesalers, distributors is a channel, right? That's not where I want to spend the time. I want to spend the time on channel phases, okay? Because there is some important questions about the product market fit, right? You have a value proposition and you have a chosen customer segment. The biggest problem as a startup is how will your customer even be aware that you exist, right? Because you're developing a product in maybe you're building an engineering solution in one of the labs in one of the universities. How does somebody even hear about you? So building awareness is perhaps, in my mind, one of the most important channel phase questions you'll be faced with, okay? And remember, you can't build awareness, there's no simple solution saying that I will advertise and therefore people will know about it, because advertising is so expensive, right? And at the initial stages, when you're evolving, when you're creating a pilot product, you are creating a minimum viable solution, right? You also don't want to tell the whole world about it, right? You want to manage this. So the most difficult part of building the business is actually this: getting people to be aware of your product or service, right? And this is an area where, for your particular solution, or you will have to spend a lot of time thinking about this. And once you have a customer who is aware of your value proposition, right? Maybe you've got a better performing product or whatever, how do they evaluate it, right? So in the example I talked about biologics to improve yield of crops, the only way they can evaluate is run a pilot. And the problem with the agriculture space, every pilot is a full planting season, right? So imagine, if the pilot is not run properly, right? Just the evaluation phase can take a hell of a long time, right? Which is one of the other problems that we had in the example that I gave, right? Where we could have a product market fit, but getting a business model fit was just so difficult, because creating awareness and then allowing them to evaluate just took a long time, right? And it didn't result in purchases of sufficient scale, right? So the other channel phases, if you think about it, are pretty straightforward. They buy, you deliver, and you continue to maintain a relationship with the customers so that, you provide good after sales support so that they come back and buy again and buy more, right? But the first two phases is a very critical phase. And if you cannot work that out, you will find that you will not go very far trying achieving a business model fit, right? So anything that you do, think about how your customer will be aware of the value proposition that you provide, right? So this is a very, very important consideration. Okay. Next slide, Kapil. Okay. And once you answer the channel question, you'll have to think of how do you build a relationship with the customer. Okay. I think many of us are familiar today where we download stuff from the app, right? So what are we doing there, right? Which is what we call self-service, right? Can you imagine why Apple's make so much money? I mean, they don't even have to sell you the, deliver the app to you. You use your credit card, buy the thing, and then download it. It's all self-service, right? What was the classic self-service? Probably the ATM machine, right? When you went to the machine and downloaded. But but in the ATM machine, there was some work at the back end, right? You need to securely load it up with cash. In the case of downloading an app from Apple, you don't even need to do that, right? So there are relationship models that are extremely profitable, and some of that evolved from the digital solutions, right? And look at the solution today, right? We're having workshops and lectures through Zoom, right? We don't even have to rent a place. We don't even need to arrange for food to deliver to you, right? Everything is done on the web, right? And, a single subscription lasts a year, right? So some of these digital models, right, which is where we talk a lot about how digitization has changed the world and will continue to change the world, is because they create these kind of relationships where a lot of it is self-service, or the cost of providing the service is very low compared to the alternative, right, which requires a lot more infrastructure. Now, why did I start there, right, instead of starting right at the top? Because we are very familiar with, going to a shop and a shopkeeper giving you personal assistance for you to decide whether you buy a Samsung or an Apple, right? And we're very familiar with it. And when is it dedicated? When you have a customer who buys huge amounts in quantity, right? Maybe you've got a flour mill and you've got a pastry maker who buys, 30% of your output. You will certainly have the salesman sit in their office and make sure that they have no problem getting their deliveries on time, right? So that's called dedicated personal assistance. And these are things that we are kind of familiar with. And in the area of consulting, we talk about co-creation, because customers accept your solution if they had a role in developing that solution, right? It's a little bit like your, if you go buy spectacles, right? Your optician will say, is this better with, is it better with this, or is it better without it, right? It's the way of trying to get a pair of specs that's exactly right for you, right? In some ways, you are therefore co-creating it with the supplier, right? So these are all existing models, but as we evolved, these self-service models, especially in the digitization space, is changing or is really coming up with innovative ways in which you have customer relationship, right? The value proposition, or the producer of the value proposition, which is you, the startup, will have with the customer segment, right? And the examples of communities is your Facebooks of the world. And nowadays people create communities for all kinds of things, right? Because you can have specific communities, walled communities for some specific solution, right? A lot of these platform solutions tend to go with communities. And you also have automated services. And I used to have a lot of this when I was doing a piece of work for a customer in the Maldives. I keep getting bombarded on the web, have you seen this hotel? Have you seen that hotel in the Maldives, right? And the reason is because, in the digital world, your search engines kind of know what you're looking at, and they begin to push things that they think you want. Even though I was looking at all of these things for the purpose of research, it assumes that I am looking for a holiday, right? So these are ways in which you can build customers' relationships, right? So for me, in today's session, because I know I'm about 45 and I do want to allow about half an hour of questions, These two things are very important from a business model perspective. Getting your channel questions answered and being very clear about how you build a relationship with your chosen customer segment, right? So that you can deliver your value proposition smoothly to them. Okay, next slide, Kapil. Yep. So I hope you've got your business model canvas open, right? So the value proposition delivered to the customer segment through a channel with the right customer relationship results in a revenue stream, right? What is the revenue stream? You can sell a product or service, which is an asset. If you sell a product, it's an asset sale. You can sell a subscription, or you can charge for it on the basis of number of transactions. When it comes to intellectual property, there are licensing deals, right? So you can get a license fee. If you engage an agent, you pay, if you're an agent that helps somebody with something, you get a breakage fee, or if it's infrastructure, you get a lease rental, right? Or you get advertising, right? So these are pretty common, right? But in your business model, some of the questions that you would deal with is, should I do an asset sale? Should I do a leasing or rental arrangement? These are what we call, what I referred to earlier as hypothesis, right? So when you're building your business model, you'll have to think through these hypotheses, right? Do you want a subscription fee or you want a transaction fee? Now, which is better? What would the customer prefer, right? Because, when volumes are small, subscription fee may be better for you, but volumes go up, transaction fee may be better for you. Now, how do you strike a balance, right? Because you really, it's all an assumption, and you can't just think from your perspective. You may have to think from the perspective of what your customer segment really wants, or your customer really wants. Okay, moving on, Saurav, Kapil. Okay, so what are key resources, assets, intellectual property, human capital, financial? So this is kind of straightforward. And of course, in today's world of digitization, we talked a lot about IP, which is intellectual property, talk about secret formulas, source codes, know-how on how you are able to build the product or the solution. So this is, an important part of it all. Next slide, Kapil. What are the activities? You produce something, you solve a problem, you provide a platform, and obviously you do business development, right? Because you have to sell, okay? So these are activities, again, straightforward. This is execution side of it. Next slide. Okay, and why do you build partnerships? There are things that others can do better because they have scale, right? So instead of you doing yourself, you'd rather have somebody do it, right? And there are some things others may just be better at you, right? So that reduces your risk. So whatever you can outsource or whatever is better performed by somebody else, you can either just have a simple vendor relationship, or you build a partnership if that particular solution or that particular part of it is critical, right? So again, in my earlier lectures, I've talked about one of my other investments, which is building medical simulators, where we have the IT skills, right? So we do the visualization, we write the codes, but the hardware comes from our partner, who is a Swiss company, because they are just simply so good at what they do, right? So sometimes key partnerships matter, and that's a case where the key partnership has created an intellectual property that is better than anything else in the market today, right? So you have to think about why you want the partnership and why the partnership model is better than you trying to create that solution yourself, okay? So this is an important question for you on execution. Next slide. Okay, so of course, when you have activities, resources, partnerships, there's always a cost, right? So I missed out a slide on the cost, but again, that's straightforward. Now, why is the business model question so important? Because it's only when you have understood your business model and you can clearly articulate the business model, can you go to the business plan, right? And I will touch a little bit next week's session on the kind of questions that I've had to face from investors, particularly about business models, right? Because each investor has got their own views on what they expect to see in terms of financial returns, right? So you have to marry this now, right? We've talked about the business model, the product market fit through the value proposition canvas, and the business model fit if you can make the business model canvas work. So that's where you do a transition, right? So after you've got this, you've done your experiment on the business model, you sort of feel that you're ready to go to market, you're ready to commercialize, right? And you want to raise money. The business model by itself is not enough, right? So what are the investors looking for? They want to know who's in the team and the profile of the team members and why that team can actually win in the marketplace, right? So again, in the first session, we talked about founders, whether you should be a single founder, whether it should be 2-3 founders with complementary skills. So this is the reason, right? So once you get to the business plan, you want to be able to say that you are a team of people that can actually win in the marketplace. And that is a very important point to convey in the business plan. The other thing in the business plan is the financial analysis, right? Everybody wants to know, okay, how much are you going to make? Is this business going to scale? What would it look like in 5 years? And these are all assumptions necessarily, right? Which is why you have to include a scenario analysis. What's the base case? Why? What is the most successful case? What is the fallback, even if nothing goes the way you want to go? So the financial analysis is important, right? And I used to run a financial model workshop, but that's really best run in person. So you may need to wait for a non-COVID period. And I think TiE now has a few people who can actually talk about financial analysis. And there are important things for you to understand here: what's fixed costs, what's variable costs, how they move with production volumes, sales volumes. So those are important things, right? So even though you don't need to become an accountant, you would need to have sufficient financial skills to demonstrate to the investor that, when you talk about numbers, profitability, future sales, you can actually explain how they build up, right? So the financial analysis is important. An environmental scan. What's an environmental scan? What's the market potential? What are the possible threats? What if you had a trade war? How will that affect your business? So taking into account all the economic, social, evolution of intellectual property, evolution of technology, how do all of these factors could affect your business is an environmental scan, right? So you have to say, are you building something that's with the times, or are you building something for a sunset industry and therefore you won't go anywhere, right? So you need to have this environmental scan as part of your business plan. And very important, people will want to ask you the question, how are you going to implement the plan, right? So the implementation roadmap, how many customers in the first year, in the second year, how would you reach them? How would you build your team? How many employees you will have? These are all part of your implementation roadmap. And of course, finally, the risk analysis, right? What could go wrong, and what have you put in place in terms of management profile, efforts, partnerships that you have built, channels you have built, right? How have you dealt with the risks that it may not work the way you want it to work, right? So, and the risk analysis will therefore cover what is your critical success factor, right? Why is it that your product or solution will win in the marketplace, right? So all of this becomes part of your business plan. And if I'm not mistaken, that's my last slide before I open for questions. Okay, question time. Okay, Okay, there's some questions about docs not received. Saurav, we've already sent the canvases, right? So anyone sort of saying, you can't read it, you should really get the mail from Saurav and look at the canvas. I hope you guys have got it. Okay, I know people ask this question about B2B to C, and SVK has answered it. Let me see if I can think of an example. I'm sort of blanking out now. Anything that comes to mind? Any companies that we have dealt with which did B2B to C?
Subra, this is Srikanth. Let me give you a possible suggestion. It's a company that we've just looked at last month at Kiretsu.
Yeah.
This is a company that's in the, they actually are in the college, university education space, but it's very interesting. They, what they do is they are providing a university management system, essentially to support everything from billing, course listing, course registration, fee collection, student hostel accommodations, all of that kind of stuff. So basically an ERP for universities, if you will. But their goal is really, so that's the B2B part, but they're only using that to be able to actually create offerings for the students. So they want to be able to provide loans to students, to be able to support them with travel, with this, with that, etc. So that is an example of a B2B2C.
That's a good one. Yeah. Now that you talk about it, I remember the business. Yeah. So I think for those who ask the question about what is B2B2C, it's on the outset, what Srikanth described is you as the business is selling to another business in that case, which is the university. But that's just an intermediate way of you reaching the customers, which is the students, because then you could use that channel or that platform to sell all kinds of other solutions to the students, right? Including student loans, travel, bus tickets, train tickets, whatever, right? So it becomes a B2B2C. Okay. I think there were some questions about diversified. By diversified, all I mean is you could have a B2C solution and a B2B at the same time. And there are things that you can sometimes sell directly. So if I go back to my medical simulator business, we could sell directly to the final customer, which is in a business, but okay, actually that's not a good example. So for example, if you may have an IoT solution that you could sell to households, right? So that becomes a B2C business. Now, which maybe, you can automate the switch, you can control switches in the house with your mobile phone, right? So that's a B2C solution. Now, the problem with selling B2C is customers usually don't buy these things, right? They buy these things through their electrician or through others, right? So parallelly, while you may do your initial sales directly to customers, you will build an alternate channel through B2B, right? Which may be electricians or somebody else who has relationship with customers. Because for you to build a B2C relationship at scale is all about how much you pour into advertising, and that is very, very difficult or very, very expensive. Right. So when you have a diversified market, it just means that you have a different product market fit, right? You have a market direct, and then eventually you find that you have to take a different channel route, right? So if you have multiple markets, that's a question. Okay, Jawahar is asking if he can be unmuted. Is he the only one with his hands up? Yep. Okay, Jawahar. I know you have questions every week, so.
Okay, sir.
Go ahead.
Yeah, your session is very so interesting, sir. I'm able to learn so many things that I was not aware of. So I'm quite inquisitive. Sir, a few questions. Sir. First, you said in the business, one of the business that you funded, you didn't see a bank to business model fit, right? So I didn't understand that particular example. In spite of having, getting very good, lab results, and also, you're able to see good yield with that agricultural product.
Mhm.
Why,
Mhm.
why would it not sell to the scale that you thought? Why was it a failure?
Okay, so there could be many things. One of the reasons is maybe we priced it wrong. Okay, so and the pricing decisions may have been because of the cost of the product, right? So you price it to make a profit. Maybe farmers feel that, at that price, see, many things affects farmers' yield, right? Not just, in that example, it was cocoa, right? Because yields are affected by weather, it's affected by other conditions, having enough employees at the right time for the harvest. So people have a lot of other considerations, right?
Yeah.
And my biggest peeve about the agriculture space is that it is extremely political, no matter which part of the world you're in. Okay, particularly the world, right? We know that agriculture is kind of political to some extent in India because farmers are a major vote bank. But that's also true in Indonesia. That's also true in Papua New Guinea. So anything that where you're dealing with farmers, politicians put their head into it, right?
Oh,
So
price,
there were
you're saying the price determination is done by the government.
not just that, or if you determine the price, they want to know what's their share in it.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it became an extremely difficult market because you had more stakeholders than you would have in other businesses, right? And without the government's help, you also cannot scale,
Okay.
right? So in my mind, I think there was a question as well, are they profitable agri models? I'm sure there are, but it is a difficult space because you have to deal with if I was selling to a private sector company, it's different from selling to a public sector company because the guy who runs the public sector plantation doesn't care whether it makes more money or less money. He's only interested in what salary he gets and what is his cut for a decision that he makes.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So it is, so it's important, right? Whatever business you're in, you need to really understand your customer, right? So which is the product market fit, right? What is your customer's job, right? So a customer of a private sector enterprise, his big job may be profits that he makes. But the customer of a public sector enterprise is maybe not the profit, it's something else, right? That the organization makes, right? So it's important that when you look at product market fit, you actually do a proper analysis of your customer profile. And I think those were some areas where we probably didn't work as hard or we weren't as aware. Of course, I started this investment more than 10 years ago. I'm probably wiser today than I was then. Okay. But, it's important thing, right? So that's why some of these frameworks might seem rigid to you, but they're actually very useful because it could really help you avoid some mistakes that we naturally make, because we as human beings believe we know everything. And the true answer is we don't.
Yeah.
Subra, can I chime in and add something here?
Yeah, sure.
I think coming back to Subra's point about the tools and frameworks, and he's repeated it several times that the value proposition canvas is an extremely powerful tool. So these questions around agri, I think the question, one way to frame the answer also is that the pains and gains, if you look at the balance on that, that's a very dynamic thing. Okay, what may, for example, that's also this other question of any examples of profitable agri-business models in India. You could argue that, look, it depends on point in time. At a particular point in time, if the pains and gains balance out in a certain kind of way, you may have a value proposition that could be profitable at that point in time. Now, of course, circumstances change for a variety of reasons, including politics, as Subra talked about. And when that happens, the pains and gains for the customer may shift. And so the customer may be less willing to buy, for example, if all of a sudden government offers certain types of subsidies or takes away certain types of subsidies, or a big player does something, which again increases the pain or decreases the gain. So I think it is important to keep that tool almost as a check for you every time you look at a business and say, okay, now for the customer, how have the pains and gains changed, and what are they at this point vis-a-vis the attractiveness of my value proposition? So just a thought that, going back to your tools and your emphasis, Subra, that the tools are actually extremely important to learn to use and to use on an ongoing basis, not just one time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, sir. The good
Yeah.
insight.
Yeah.
Subra sir, so if you were to do that project now, what would you have done it differently? How would you have, when you did the paper problem solution fit, right, on paper, would you have checked with the customers if they would buy this product at this price point? So what
Yeah.
would you have done it
So
differently?
I think that's right. So I think before putting in as much money as I put into it, I think I would have spent a lot of time completing my value proposition canvas.
Okay.
Really go to the place, understand the customer, some of the points that Srikanth raised as well, what are the stakeholder things, what prompts their decision, so really understanding the customer profile, the gains and pains that they're looking for, right? And Srikanth makes an important point, whether it's your value proposition canvas or your business model canvas, it changes in time, okay? So these are not static documents, okay? And in fact, unfortunately, I think we pulled the plug because we had lost too much money at a time where the market was showing signs of shifting, right? So maybe we were just way too early. And and I'm not saying that the market is ready now, but I'm saying that, if I had approached it a little bit more systematically, working through the canvas and really understanding the customer, I think that's what I would do differently, right? I would use the models that I've learned.
Okay, so was there an alternative product at that point of time when you started this project? No.
Well, there were snake oil products, right, which didn't really work, right? And that was one of the problems. Okay. People say, oh, I know this other cheaper thing, right? Okay. But it takes them a year to find out that it doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
So it's a very complex space. Biologics is a very complex space, okay, right? And of course, once you deal with agriculture, you also have the issue of subsidies, right? And one of the destructions of soil conditions in India is because urea is subsidized, and urea is nothing but hydrocarbon. So so it's a very, very complex space.
Okay, sir, got you.
Yep.
Got you.
I know you're in the choir business, so you touch agriculture, but it is a complex space.
Okay. Got you, sir. So the other question I had was on the channels you sell, right? You spoke about, creating awareness without spending much time for much money on advertisement, right?
Yeah.
So can you give me some examples or ways that I can do without spending much money on awareness?
Yeah. So, so in the technology space, the way they build awareness is through a minimum viable product, right? And how do they reach customers, right? So your initial reach to customers, and which is why we often like companies that come out of accelerators, come out of universities, because all the lecturers are a channel for them, right? So the idea is, can you be part of an organization or even a membership of TiE? I think Akila is on the call, right? So she would like to hear this, right? It's building a network through which you could test these things out, right? So you have you build a network through which you can build awareness, right? And you find that sometimes there are people in the network who can bring you to others, Um, so really building awareness is a long game, right? And people use technology, people use search engine optimization using, the technology tools. Um, Other things is, like say if in your agriculture space, what do farmers read, right? Depending on who your customer is, right? What do they read? Um, so you need to be very focused about how you build that awareness. And your initial awareness building, whether you like it or not, is just door knocking and talking to the customer, the potential customers, right? Your first customers must be your evangelists, right? So find out your evangelists, who will talk well about your product, and take it to places.
Okay. And so you also spoke about not the entire world knowing about it, right? So why would I not put it on my social media like Facebook or Instagram and let the whole world know about it?
Sure, I think that works for a B2C kind of segment.
Yeah.
But does it work for B2B? I'm not sure.
Okay.
Right? I mean, why do I want to tell the world about my medical simulator, right? I don't want some joker reading about it, trying to recreate something like that. I only want to talk to hospitals with university attached.
I mean, when I say to the world, I mean, in my, in a medical simulator case, it would be the people who use in the hospitals, right?
Correct.
Doctors.
Correct.
So
That's
I can put it on a social media, like Instagram or Facebook, and then, direct my, advertisement only to those people, who are interested in that product.
Yeah. I think when you talk about advertisement through social media, I'm not the right person to talk to because I don't like social media.
Okay.
But I think there are experts who actually, and there are experts who are TiE Charter members who understand how to use the social media, right?
Okay.
So I wouldn't say it works for everything. It works for certain things, but I don't think it works for everything.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, so I'm sure if you talk to TiE, there are people who know, social media marketing better than I do.
Okay, sir. And then one last question, sir. You spoke about multi-sided market, right? Can you give me some examples of that?
Classic, right? Take your newspaper,
Okay.
right? The newspaper has two customer segments, right? One is you who buy the newspaper,
Okay.
right? Two, which is a B2C.
Okay.
The other is a B2B, right? Which is the companies that advertise in it.
Oh, okay. Got you.
Right? So that's a multi-sided market, right? That's the classic multi-sided market. And if you think about it, Google is a multi-sided market. All of us who use it for a search engine don't pay for it, but they make a ton of money out of advertisers.
Okay.
So that's a classic multi-sided market, right? And actually, you need to treat the guy who's not paying well as well, right? Because if more customers come, then they can make more money out of the advertisers.
Okay.
So that's a classic multi-sided market.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. And one more comment I would like to make, sir, is that, when I speak to my friends and relatives about this angel investors and venture capitalists, the general public perception that I could read is, everybody thinks the scrutiny that you guys put them through is like, humongous. I mean, and they all have a feeling that, it's very impossible to get through the scrutiny that the angel investors put them through. So I'm wondering, is there a bare minimum criteria or that people can meet, and what would be the criteria to at least start a pilot project? Because the public perception is like that. After listening to you, I could see there's a lot of risk involved in investing the money. But at least to encourage more people, is there a way investors can come to a bare minimum requirements where they can at least start the project, and get going?
Okay. See, it's not like angel investments don't take place. What is it, Shrikant? We've invested in 60 companies over the last 6 years.
Right.
Right.
63. Yeah.
63. Right. So it's not like it doesn't take place. It's just that by the time you speak to a potential investor, you must have done your homework. Right. So these sessions, these 6 sessions we're going through is something that hopefully, enables you to do that homework. And, and we have been, very happy to invite entrepreneurs as guests to our sessions to listen to how others pitch. And that's how you learn. You have to learn from others.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
So it's not like, I mean, sure. And the point is right.
Can I give an analogy, Subra?
Yeah.
I mean, see, it's like, for example, if you think about building a house, Jawahar, I mean, you won't dare start building a house without a verified business, a blueprint, right? I mean, have put together the plans, have done the engineering calculations, etc. before you even go to the bank and raise the money to start the construction, right? I mean, you don't turn around and say, those guys, they're so terrible. They're not letting me drive my pile foundation. I mean, just start digging the floor and start doing something, right? A business is like that. You're actually building a house that you're going to live in, and this is, in this case, it's a business house, right? So there's some diligence, as Subra said, there's some rigor that is needed. And instead of seeing it as angels are doing it to you, you've got to say, I have to do it anyway. And here are people that are actually helping me make sure that I'm asking all the right questions so that I don't build a house that falls on my head and kills me.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Right?
That is a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. We are not there to make it difficult for you. We are there to try and make sure that you're asking yourself all the right questions. Okay. And that you come to us. So, for example, if you go through the kinds of frameworks that Subra has laid out, and then you are able to say, look, you know what, I have proven to the extent possible that there is a product market fit. Okay. And here is the evidence that supports that. That is the equivalent of saying I've created a blueprint, okay, for a building. I've done the engineering calculations, and now I'm going to do some pile driving to test to see if actually the soil will hold this kind of structure, right? And then I need money to do that. So it's like that. You think of it like that. It's in stages that you're building the structure, okay? And that is what it is all about.
Take the investors as my mentors.
Yeah,
they're ready to help me in reducing my failure rate, right?
Exactly. Whether you think of them as your mentors or not, they are your partners. Okay, some will be mentors, but some are just partners. Okay, partners as in business partners. So you want a business partner that you believe actually, first of all, you can add value to you and they can add value to you, right? It's mutual. So that's how you choose an investor, as somebody who can actually add value to you.
Okay. Thank you, Rajan sir.
Sure.
Thank you, Subra sir.
I mean, there's a great example. We are building a beach house, and it took us several months to freeze the design. And only after you freeze the design can you engage the structural engineer, make sure that the house will hold, right? So it's a process, right? So building a business is a bit like that. See, there's a question from Mohan Sundaram about how do we treat hidden business model? I actually don't understand the question. Do you want to unmute and ask the question? What do you mean by hidden business model?
Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
This is for example, McDonald's. We all believe it's to be a burger company, but they are more of a real estate company. And on unit economics, they project the P&L account based on the units product sold, but the company also equally or more earns revenue through not so obvious business model.
Okay. And I think you've got to be careful with the McDonald's example in the sense that what you described may be right in some countries, particularly the United States. I'm not sure it's right in other countries. Certainly, that doesn't work in a place like Singapore, right?
So Subra, let's replace that with, say, for example, Google, right? I mean, today, not Google, Amazon.
Yeah.
So Amazon, for instance, makes a lot of revenue, more revenue with AWS, right? The cloud service, the hosting service, than they do with selling books and selling products and even streaming your movies and so on.
Yeah.
So why don't you take it in that context and maybe address it in that context?
Right. I mean, what Shrikant described is it's a classic diversified market, right? So whether, you know, Amazon, as we all know, started selling books, right? But today they sell almost anything under the sun. Now, why did they then diverge into the AWS, right? Providing software solutions. And they did that because to build the distribution and the fulfillment for selling products, they created a computer power that was greater than what they needed, right? Because, you know, if there's a surge, they would need to respond to it. And they suddenly realized they had all this capacity that is sitting idle at times. And the thing about, you know, selling software is the margins are fantastic. Selling a product, the margin is not great, right? It's a trading business.
Okay.
But selling, you know, software, because it already exists to support the other business, right? So providing cloud services and all the other things through AWS, it's a huge margin business, right? Now, I'm not sure that's hidden. In fact, any astute observer will understand that that's what they have done. And many of these companies that are listed actually tell the world that that's what they're doing, because they want their investors to increase their share price, right? They want the analysts to report greatly about them. So I'm not sure there are hidden business models. It's just that they're diversified markets.
Yeah, or if
No,
I could
when they
add to that, I
when they
think it is
pitched
the
in the
appropriate phrase is really more, are there, first of all, as Subra said, diversified markets, but they may not all be envisaged in the beginning. Some of them are emergent. Okay.
emergent. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So if you use that phrase, see, part of it is, and this is the beauty of thinking of all of these tools, the value proposition and business model canvas as ongoing tools, is that what today, when you build out your first business model, what today may be a key asset or a key resource or a key partnership, tomorrow you may turn around and say, let me create a business I target a different customer segment with a different value proposition based on an asset that I built with my first business model. So then you start creating a diversified bouquet of value proposition, customer segment combinations. Okay. So, and that is where, again, using an emergent model framework says that, look, you know, you look at every day, look at your business model canvas and ask yourself, what has changed about this? You know, where are the opportunities, the new opportunities that I can go after? And that is not just on the right side of the business model, it's also on the left side. Okay. What about the execution capability? Can I turn around and create an offering that maybe will generate revenue for me? Okay, or will solidify a customer relationship, you know, etc. So, Subra, that's I qualify that it's not so much hidden as emergent, and from that point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it has to be a very dynamic canvas. It cannot be a rigid canvas.
Yeah. Any other questions? We still have 5 minutes today. Okay, something came to the chat. My customer pain is to bring awareness to their clients and patients. How do I do that?
I think the question is wrong. It's not a customer's pain. I don't know. I think
So, are you, Shilpa, are you saying that your challenge is, so who's your customer, right? It's worth defining. Is it your intermediary, the wellness center? Is it the customer? Shilpa, you want to ask your question?
Yeah. See, I am, I have developed these tests to assess Prakriti, which is, something that is very necessary for Ayurvedic doctors. And that is something that they need to use with each and every one of their patients or clients. But the problem that they are facing is that they also need to bring in awareness, which by taking my test, the end user, that is a person, the general public, whoever needs to go to an Ayurvedic doctor, will understand your body type and, in technical language, what your dosha guna combination is and all that stuff and how they behave and all that. But their problem is that they need their customers or their clients, their patients, to become more aware of, their body type and not Google it up and all that stuff, so that they can come to them with a little bit of awareness based on which they will give them their medication or whatever the treatment that they have to be given. Now, how do I, as an intermediary, sort of over here, bring in that kind of an awareness in the end user, which will help me also, because they would be using my test, which comes under the domain of diagnostics for Ayurvedic doctors, and help the Ayurvedic doctors also.
Okay. Now, this is a classic channel question, right? So you don't have access to the final person, right? Because the patient is not yours. The patient is that of the Ayurvedic doctor, right? So you're really selling your solution to the Ayurvedic doctor, right? So if the Ayurvedic doctor is convinced, why wouldn't they recommend it to their patients?
Acha. So, okay. So, okay.
Right? So, sometimes it's not a defining, it's a classic channel question, right? So, so this is always a problem, right? I mean, you have no access to the general market. You can't go and advertise and make them aware, right? It's just impossible, right? So you have to rely on your channel. And in this case, it seems to be your Ayurvedic doctors, If they are convinced, why wouldn't they recommend it to their customers, right? That's how it works.
Okay.
Again, this is a tricky one. We can put you in touch with some people that may help, may have some ideas on not too expensive digital marketing. But what Subra is offering is the cost-free marketing solution here, which is that your Ayurvedic doctors, if they are out there trying to get their word out, first of all, starting with existing customers. I mean, that's the first place they would start, right? Tell their existing customers, hey, listen, you know what? We have this great tool. So can you offer it to your family and to your friends, and saying that, look, I'll incentivize you. If you do that, I'll give you a break. Okay, the first person that uses it, I give you for every person, I give you a break, or something. So it could be that. Otherwise, you can also, use digital marketing. There's a company that we work with. They can, maybe for a small fee, they can help you figure out what are the groups, the social media that Subra and I and others maybe either love or hate. Maybe there are targeted groups that are actually focused on Ayurveda and things and interest groups in that. So find ways to get the awareness built. I mean, back to Subra's point about channel partners, those social media may be a good place that we can help build awareness. Okay. Also ask yourself, are there, today there are plenty of Ayurvedic medical dispensaries. In Chennai, there is Incomps, there is others, etc. So that's also a place where you can go and say, hey, listen, you know what? Wouldn't it be nice for you to put flyers out there to everybody that maybe even drops in, saying that, look, you know what? Circulate this. And if the first time using this, you get you a discount on the drugs you buy or on the consultation you get. So the point is, what Subra is saying is, you got to think a bit more creatively about all the different players that actually are already in the space, rather than first starting with how do I reach by myself directly and advertise.
Okay. Could you please share the contact details of the person or the agency that you mentioned? I would be very grateful.
So you try Praveen Shekhar, who is a charter member of TiE. He is one of those on the digital marketing.
Your voice is very tinny. I can't hear you.
No, what SK was saying was there's a gentleman called Praveen Shekhar.
He is very good in digital marketing. He's a charter member of TiE Chennai.
Okay. So TiE Chennai will be able to help me.
Yeah, you can check up with the secretariat and find out. Yeah.
Okay, I will do that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Jawahar got a question. What sectors attract the most investments? Again, it's different. A Chennai investor base may be different from a Bangalore investment base. In Chennai, people tend to like, I think I've said it in my earlier sessions, people tend to like real products, engineering solutions that are innovative rather than e-commerce type solutions, so or software solutions. But it could be different in a Bangalore environment, which is extremely IT driven, and Bombay could be different. So it just depends, right? So you will need to do that research on, depending on where you plan to pitch or who you plan to pitch to.
There's a lot of investment in SaaS in Chennai. Chennai is not known as the SaaS capital for nothing. So
yeah.
SaaS is a very popular area among several investors, and we have, of course, companies like Freshworks, etc., that actually have done remarkably well, OrangeScape, etc. So I would consider those as. I mean, at Kiretsu, what Subra is talking about with engineering and that kind of focus, the technology focus, I think is there, but it is actually, in terms of total investment dollars, even in Chennai, I think SaaS actually dwarfs what we put into technology companies.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I think that's the last question.
Yeah, I think there was a thing Charumadi has sort of asked you to unmute. Maybe you can let her the last question.
Done,
sir. Hello, sir. Good evening.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, we are into healthcare space. The problem, which we are trying to address is not like, we are looking for, yes, there is a growing need for the solution. We're looking at the need will arise a little more higher in the coming next 2 to 3 years. That's the area. Like we are working in the cost data analytics in hospitals and healthcare providers. That's where we are addressing. So this is not like, absolute need. There is something looking for. Yes, if I go with the solution, there are people who would look, would like to try. That's the kind of market I am right in. And we are trying to work on a SaaS solution to address this. So in this scenario, what it would be our advice, where we need to be careful, or how do we do the business plan, where we need to give more importance? Could you give me some suggestion on that?
Yeah, so if you, I don't know if you attended the first session.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so my biggest thing is the timing right?
Yes.
Okay, so now to me, that's where you should plan your attention, right? So make sure you do your market research and know that you actually have a customer segment and customers are prepared to pay. Because you started this question by saying that this will become more important in the next 2 to 3 years. So it raised the flag for me as to whether the timing of your solution is right. Because that's a very important question. I mean, you can have a great business model, but if your timing is wrong, the business will fail.
Yes, sir. The timing, actually, that's what I'm saying. Like, the timing, or what would I say? Like, the need, the lookout for such solution has already started in the market the last 2 years, but it's not so obvious. It works on one between consultants to hospital. That's how it goes right now on a very, very mild way. But it's to give you a few examples. Probably 10 years back, when there was not much of quality aspects into the hospital, but when the ISO and then slowly to move on to NABH and JCI, and in all of a sudden the last 5 to 6 years or 9 years, we see even the government started enforcing on the NABH. Similarly, even in the costing and the pricing and the packaging things, that just started 2 years back. So that's in that sense I'm saying, like, it's going to be because the Ayushman Bharat or the private health insurance, the ecosystem changes in India, everything will make it like how the quality tools became a norm. Something similar that this also would happen. That's what we are foreseeing. That's what I mean to say. But even right now, we have a need. That's what I'm saying. Exactly. Customers are not saying like, where do we get a solution like this? May not be that, but still that, discussions and everywhere, whichever the healthcare discussion forum we go, there's always a topic on costing.
Yeah. Okay. So without getting into more details, I mean, the whole idea is, if it's an emerging market and it may take time for it to actually establish itself, then you want to pace yourself, right? And make sure you have the funds to last the journey, because the big sales may not come till much further down the road, right? Because, all this compliance is a big issue in India, right? I mean, it doesn't happen quickly, right? They finally comply when they really have to, or the government forces them to comply, or, whether it's moving to new standards or moving into better cost solutions or whatever. So I think the important thing is really to know your customer. So again, going back to your value proposition customer segment, is it sufficient pain for the customer that they will actually buy your solution? They're looking for the gain that you provide. So, and the only way you will know is you've got to speak to your customer and understand and look at the environment and see how it will evolve. And if it's going to take a little bit of time to evolve, then you have to make sure that you have the power to sustain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Saurav.
Yes, sir. So, yeah. Thank you for yet another very informative session, sir, and helping our participants understand the various customer segments, value proposition, business model canvas, and business plan. So, thank you. The next and the fourth session is on the Tuesday, August 25th. It will be on part 2 of fundraising, which covers on how to plan and execute a fundraise. So before we sign off, I have a small announcement to make. TiE Chennai has planned a week-long virtual TiECon this year from October 5th to October 10th. We'll be having sessions on all 6 days, and every day there will be a speaker session in Tamil from 5 to 6 p.m. and sessions in English from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll also be having master classes. And for the first time, we'll be launching our virtual TiE Sunday, which will be open the whole day from 10 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. on all 6 days. And it will be open to members and non-members and any visitors. The booking for TiE Sunday is open now, and book a stall. Feel free to contact me. I shall post my email ID and phone number in the chat. So thank you once again, sir. Thank you all for joining in today. See you all next week. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Good night.